Periscope and Twitch, LinkedIn Live and YouTube. And this is where we discuss no bullshit, 100% real, raw, and unfiltered, life-changing advice on life, entrepreneurship, personal development, family tech, and marketing. Of course, my name is Ivan Temelkov, and I'm your host. And today, I have a special guest by the name of Jason that's joining me. You know what? How do you pronounce your last name, Jason?
I was waiting for that. So it's Jason Wasser. I know I've used to get all the everything. Wasser, right? Jason Wasser as in water. So it's actually originally from that background. But yeah. So well,
awesome. So
good to be here.
Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
To tell you a little bit about Jason before we start chatting a little bit about his story is that he's a licensed therapist, entrepreneur coach, and mind-body medicine expert who, let's just say, has done a plethora of things in his life. And I am very ecstatic about hearing about all that because I'm a sucker for stories. I'm a sucker for especially experiences in adversity, because I think those are things that really help us become the people that we are, help us teach us things. So, Jason, let's start with, early childhood. Tell us where you've been, what you've seen.
Oh man. So it's always the reverse engineer story, right? So it's go figure why I'm a therapist with everything I went through. And it's funny that a lot of the things that I love working with the most are the things that I did go through, and helping people get past that wall that, they need a dream team around them, to be supportive and to work through that stuff. But I grew up in South Florida. My family's originally from Scranton, Pennsylvania, previous to The Office ever existing. Right? That's like, oh, you're from where The Office is. I'm like, no, like that's first of all, it's a UK show that got adopted, right? It's still a great show, don't get me wrong. But but I'm like, that is kind of what Scranton people are like. But my family moved here when I was 1, and I'm actually the only sibling. I'm the oldest of 3, but I'm the only sibling who's not in our 3rd generation family furniture business. So going back into like a whole crazy paradigm of like, how did I end up on this side, of tracks of emotions and personal development and healing and stress and all this stuff is I had a traumatic experience. I had great things as a childhood, but I also had the oldest. I was most front and center to my parents' divorce, starting from middle school and even finishing. It didn't even finish until after I graduated high school. Didn't have the world's greatest self-esteem. I was short. I'm still short. I'm 5'2" today. And I had this, thing. And even though I played sports and I had a good group of friends, it was always, this identity, that the stigma around being, vertically challenged, as they would say back in the day. So I had all these things that, like, on one side, really nice, good friends and good people in my life, but the other side had these self-doubts and wasn't a great student. I barely graduated high school. I had a 1.8 GPA, which for those of us in the entrepreneur world, I believe that Ed Milet, if you're right from the Max Out podcast, I think his was around that, and Jesse Itzler was also around that. And there was a podcast episode of them talking about that. So I know I'm in good company with those people, right? With people who have not done so great and kind of figured it out later in life. But I did struggle. I struggled with a lot of like self-identity, self-esteem, definitely a lot of anger. I wasn't like an angry, like I wasn't lashing out and getting into fist fights. I had a good life. I had good things going on, but there was that internalized struggle. And because of not doing well in high school, I didn't really get accepted to any good colleges. And I got even a waiting list on a university that back in the day, everybody used to get into.
Right.
That was before it was a cool school to go to. So I ended up going to Israel for 2 years and studying over there and kind of trying to figure out like some of that inner outer stuff, right? That spiritual side, who am I, identity alignment. Eventually came back here to America and worked in a lot of informal education programs, nonprofits. And eventually my last job before I ended up realizing I was going to go to graduate school was at Princeton University, a school that I would never have gotten into as a student. It's a school that I got to work at in student programming for the Center for Jewish Life, which is their Jewish student union on campus, doing programming. And one of my students who was graduating at the end of the year, one day was hanging out in my office, and my office was, I was either hanging out with them on campus or hanging out with them, they would, I was informally doing therapy already at that point. And she's like, so what are you doing next year? Because I knew my contract was up and I wasn't going to continue. And I was already thinking about graduate school and some other things. And I'm like, I'm thinking about going into therapy, but I don't know what program. So we sat down on my computer And we found this marriage and family therapy program in South Florida, which is where I'm from. And the beautiful thing was they didn't require GREs to enter, which is shocking because most graduate schools, right, need some type of graduate exam. And when I called to find out, they're like, we don't believe that a GRE will determine how good of a therapist you'll become. A standardized test.
Right.
Like, that's it. That's the school I want to go to. And because I know I'm not a good tester, I'm not a good academic, but I know I'm good at what I do. And if I learn the skills, I'm going to be able to take the skills. So I realized to this point that I probably would not have been able to ever become the person I become had this school buck the philosophy of testing means you'll be successful or not in the world. Right. And we see that way more now, right, in the entrepreneurship space that, right, Gary Vee talks about this and all these other, right, you don't need to go, right, just do your thing and learn your skills. And, right, college doesn't necessarily, or graduate school doesn't necessarily equate you being an entrepreneur, business person, success, whatever. But for me, that really was the beginning of this journey of, oh my gosh, like people believe in me because my skills showed up in different ways. And then as I progressed going through therapy and finishing school and all that stuff, becoming a therapist, I started getting my interest, right? Performance and sports and athletes. And then I started going through this integrative alternative medicine stuff because I was struggling with stuff. And I stumbled upon having panic attacks. I stumbled upon this modality called neuroemotional technique that I saw presented at a workshop. And a month or so later, 2 months later, I did it. I went to someone for myself, got some anxiety panic attacks that I was going through at that point handled. A month later, did my first training. And now that's the main hands-on modality that I do with clients in person. But that brought me outside of the box of being a therapist, of like pushing up against, again, another box, another thing that's like, you can only do this if you want to be a therapist. You can't do those type of things. That's weird. That's out of right. Which is kind of what an entrepreneur has to like kind of break the model. They have to do something different in order to bring value. And then that led me to an introduction to someone who does this entrepreneur coaching program. And I'm like, but I'm a therapist. I'm a healer. I'm not an entrepreneur. And he's like, but you are. I'm like, no, I left that world. I didn't want to go to the family business. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a therapist. By the end of the first day of that conference, my mouth was on the floor. I did not realize that everything I was doing was really in alignment with entrepreneurship from the perspective of I have core values. I need to proclaim my core values. I need to decide everything I'm doing binary based on these core values. And when I bring that into my business and I bring that into my relationships and I bring that into my financial investing and I bring that into the food I bring into my house, that's being entrepreneurial. And that was the first biggest lesson I learned that I'm like, holy crap. And that led me down the rabbit hole through this program where I became a certified coach as an entrepreneur and business coach, which I'm now working with businesses and entrepreneurs and owners and their families and that whole. So I'm bringing the family therapy perspective into that system of businesses and entrepreneurship.
So I want to unpack that a little bit more and everything that you just said. And I want to go all the way back to starting with Ed Milet, who's actually a former mentor of mine.
Nice.
And what's really crazy actually about that on top of this is that my 41st birthday was a week ago, and he wished me happy birthday on Instagram.
Sweet.
And I nearly shit my pants because, this is someone who is, set aside his net worth of what, 400 million or something. But the fact
crazy.
Yeah. The fact that someone actually has the recognition of that, that actually pays attention to stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
Because when you captivate attention, but even more so than that is this podcast, the RAS Project, actually is up there with Ed Milet's Max Out and Andy Frizella's Real AF.
Nice.
If you search on Apple Podcasts, believe it or
awesome.
not. And so suddenly as you were talking about this is, I believe there's a reason that you are on this podcast. You're here because you were meant to come on this podcast.
For sure.
And it's fascinating because from an entrepreneurial standpoint, really, it's that energy and that attraction that gets created when you surround yourself with like-minded people. People who are optimistic, people who want to thrive, people who want to, max out, right? People who want to achieve their full potential in life, in business, in their relationships. And I'm one of those people. That's a little where the RAS Project started six years ago. It's pivoted multiple times. But so you said that. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, so when you're talking about Princeton, right? And I think you said that this was a school that you wanted to get into, I believe, but you couldn't get into it. And then
no, I wouldn't even think about even applying there. That's the thing, right? It's the fact that like I got offered 2 different jobs the same weekend. And I remember so the other university that I was applying to be a program director for was University of Hartford. And before I left, I was back in Jersey at my uncle's, and I only had one connection in the entire Hartford community. So I actually I only knew one person there, right? So at least I was going in pretty blind to not having a support system. And I went back to New Jersey where I was flying out of. And I looked at the same website that had this position, Princeton. I'm like, whatever. Like I'm going to throw a curve. I'm going to throw it out there, right? It was really ballsy of me, because why would they want me? So, and I already had the job offer from University of Hartford. Way different. I mean, it's a school of totally different caliber, right? I mean, it's still a good school, but it's just not. It's not an Ivy League school, right? And so I had the interview like the next day, and by that night, I think by the time I got home, 2-3 days later, they offered me the gig, and I'm like, listen, like I need you to match. I know you have money. I need you to match. You know, it's Princeton. It's not like it's not like there's a shortage of funding. So I need you to match. It was nothing. It was like $1,000 difference, over the course of a year. So, but the fact that I even asked for that number, right? We're not talking about like hundreds of that. We're talking about like $35,000, for the year. Sure. That's how in 2002 or whatever it was. Wow. Yeah. But that was big money. 35,000, and I'm going to go negotiate for $35,000. I'm going to get that extra $1,000 out of him, right? That was ballsy for me back then, because right? Who am I? I'm a 22-year-old guy with whatever. And if you want me, you got it, right? So, so I think that was like a big step, and I always, I'm like, wow, this is so interesting. Like I'm so not, I'm not Princeton material, but yet I'm here. So what does that mean? And the connections that I made there, the people that I met there, I Dr. Ruth, the world famous, right? Everybody knows Dr. Ruth from the old sex, the Friday, she's a sexologist, and, she's 80 years old, whatever. So like I went for a walk with her because she was a visiting professor. So I got introduced to all these really cool, amazing people. Yep. So like there's these little stages of my life that like I didn't realize were an unpackaging of the future of what can be for me that I had to be willing to embrace.
Well, one thing that you mentioned is you said very ballsy of you. I think it's that scarcity mindset that actually turns off a lot of people, because looking at my experiences as an immigrant, Eastern European, bullied all through high school. In fact, I got my ass grilled in a room on the new Clubhouse app in front of like 8 and 9 figure earners, because my story, because the way I usually lead is like, well, here's, my story, here's what I do, and here's how it evolved into my business. And they almost like interpreted it as trying to give me self-pity because I went through all this adversity. Now, to me, I believe that, you have to be ballsy. You have to remove the scarcity mindset. And I wish I had only done that earlier in life, because I feel like I missed out on so many opportunities. But now, being older, it's like, don't regret the opportunities you missed out on. Just embrace the ones that are in front of you. Because literally, here's a prime example talking about like scarcity, right? Like being bullied all through high school. I haven't talked to anybody from my high school days in 25 years, and I set that, aside. I got over it, I let it go. But for a period of 10 years, I wouldn't let go. I wanted justice. I wanted justification. I wanted, because of what these people did to my self-confidence and self-esteem, that really impacted my life. I mean, I worked 3 jobs. I dropped out of college. Yeah. I was smoking for a period of 10 years, just floating by through life, and I blamed it on those people. Right. I blamed it on those people because I thought that they were at fault of why, my life took, a right turn, so to speak, or took no turn whatsoever. I just kept coasting, and then I realized, what, the best way to move forward is to let go. So you were talking about being ballsy. It's like, you knew your value, you stood up to it, you took the initiative, and that's what you got. That's what got you the opportunity. You seized the opportunity when most people don't do that.
Sure. But my value at that point, and I really love what you're saying, is there's 2 things I want to touch on. One is that what was my perceived value at that point, which is only to the extent of what I was capable of asking for or seeing what I can bring to the table, right? So my value at that point was only $35,000 of output.
And that's not a whole ton. by the way, but yeah, you're
right.
right.
That's where my perspective was
Right.
as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, that like my value is only equivalent to a $35,000 salary. And being someone's, I realized like when the day I realized when I was working in another private practice and I was like literally paying their rent and paying their staff. And I'm like, I'm done, right? I will never make exponentially the amount of money because they're always taking a percentage. Right. And I'm not, I'm helping them grow. It's not helping me grow. There's no Jason's reputation. It's building their business. And I'm always growing. And at a certain point, the amount of income I'm going to be making is going to pay their entire practice. So why aren't I doing that for myself if it's the same percentage point, right? That I can just have as long as I'm beating that overhead on my own, I'm eventually going to minimize that number. But I knew that like I saw that at that point years later and working, and this was the second group practice that I worked in, that I will never be able to make more than X amount of dollars if I keep doing this with myself for working for someone else, right? So the second point that I wanted to bring up is that there's two ways that someone can live in this world about any topic in life. And they can be empowered about that topic or they can be a victim to that topic. And we all have a multitude of topics that we're one or the other. Our job is to figure out which ones we're empowered in and which ones we're still playing victim to, consciously or unconsciously. Yeah. And I think that's where someone like, me comes in, where, especially in the business world and being a therapist that works with performing athlete, right, artists and athletes and business professionals and whatever, is that where you can't get your true success in the entrepreneurship space unless you know what you're capable of doing and deserving without some false beliefs jumping around in there and keeping you back from making some really powerful all-in decisions.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to shift the convo to is kind of seeing the evolution of your early days as you were kind of building up momentum and paving your path. Was there a point in your life where you kind of, were like starting to kind of narrow in on like what exactly you wanted to do with, the therapy and the coaching, obviously, and can you talk a little bit about that? Like, was there a kind of moment or was there an experience or did you have an epiphany maybe?
Well, I think all of the things that I'm doing are things that I'm passionately interested in my personal life. So when people, the people who really know me know the things that I do in my practice and the things I talk about and the things that are showing up in my world are consistent whether I'm working or I'm not working. Right. So it doesn't mean that when I'm doing it in my free time, I'm working and it's about building my business. It's not. It's that these are things that I'm just seriously interested on my own. So if you look at my bookshelves, which there are plenty of them, it really is the four things that my podcast is doing. And psychology, right? The mindset, the whole world of healing and psychology and therapy and whatever. Spirituality and spirituality as it means to the person. It doesn't necessarily need to be a God-based spirituality. And there are people who are religious and not spiritual, and people who are spiritual and not religious. So it's not about it's not about a that monolithic type of perspective, but uplifting, right? What are you doing that's spirituality? We can even call personal development, right? Outside of psychology. Then we have my integrative and alternative medicine and alternative wellness, the integrative wellness side of things, functional medicine, functional nutrition, neuroemotional technique, working out, getting the right, that type of stuff, the wellness side of things, and the entrepreneurship side. So I do believe that those four verticals are the pillars that if you really get those handled, those are the four most successful, your life will be the most successful when you get those four pillars handled.
You said something I want to go back to that's really important. And I should just recognize this, believe it or not, is that you said what you do in your practice, in your business, is consistent with your life. Yeah. In other words, it's just that you're passionate about what you do, so you live and breathe it. And I think in the entrepreneurial community, I want to shift the conversation towards that, is that there's too many entrepreneurs that get into entrepreneurship just for business reasons because they want to make money. And they don't look at, the purpose and the passion and the why. They don't emphasize upon that. And then they get into business, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, and they realize, oh shit, I hate doing this. I got into this because I just wanted to make money. I got into real estate or technology and just because I just wanted to make fucking money because I got tired of, doing the 9-to-5 grind. And like you said, it's like, oh shit, they're taking away cuts when I could be doing this on my own.
Yes.
So I want to talk about psychology and mindset because I think you can share so much about this. in the entrepreneurial community. Like, can you share more about, in your experience, what do you think? Because I think psychology and personal development mindset might be all in the same, is so undervalued in the entrepreneurial community.
Yeah.
When in fact, I think those are the driving factors behind entrepreneurship. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Obviously, you've coached athletes and you've done a lot of different things, but what's the constant? Can you share some value around
Sure.
that?
Yeah, well, the value is the core values, and this is one of my big topics. And it's the simplest way to solve a problem is always the simplest way to solve the problem, and we're typically overthinking things when we're trying to do that. And that's why I always go back to, if I know your core values, and if you're uncertain about your core values, I'm going to help you create your core values. But if you know your core values, I can help you get everything you want with simplicity and probability. Yeah. So if you tell me that your core values are these 5 things, then we're just going to go through everything in your life and say, let's find the things that are in alignment with that you're letting in. Let's find the things that are not in alignment with that you are letting in. And let's figure out a way to get those things out of your life. Because if that's taking up bandwidth, and most likely it's taking up a lot of bandwidth because it's not in alignment with who you are and who you need to be, then it's probably overburdening you and taxing your system. So you can't focus on the things you need to do that are going to come easier, right? Doesn't mean it's not going to take effort, but I'm talking about easier when it comes from that you're in more alignment with it. So it's going to be more organically natural for you to succeed in that. And a lot of that is all distractions. And the other side of the coin is it's also a lot of toleration tendency, that we willingly tolerate things for the sake of social pressure, family pressure, cultural pressure, religious pressure, whatever, keeping up with the Joneses pressure, whatever, that we know really doesn't serve us, but we tolerate it because we think that there's going to be some value add to it that really doesn't serve us. And we do that a lot in relationships too. Whether it's romantic relationships or even employer relationships, right? All those things are like, they brought in $100,000 worth of profit last year, but they completely don't reflect the business's brand. That's a tough place. But I don't know any business that doesn't have someone like that.
So you mentioned something I want to touch upon because this is really key. You said core values.
Yeah.
So without going down the long version route, I'm someone who's been in the digital and the marketing social space for 26 years. And 6 years ago, when I started my business, I really wanted to focus on human centricity behind business and marketing. And when you said core values, it's actually ironic because just a few days ago, I actually, mind you, after 6 years, was able to write down these core values, not because I didn't know them in my head all these 6 years. It's because I finally could articulate them. I want to share them with you because I think you can speak to all of these. First one is integrity, being honest and transparent about everything. Disruption, in constant search of new horizons. People, forge human-to-human connections. Impact, create a positive change and shift with longevity. Consistency, nonstop pursuit of helping others and our clients achieve their goals. Empathy, genuinely giving a shit about our people and clients that we work with. Deliverability, what we say we'll do is what we deliver while also going above and beyond the call of duty. Accountability, giving a fuck is simply giving a fuck. That's all there's to it. And we take full accountability for every situation we engage in. The last one, be yourself. Zero judgment passed, and we'll welcome freedom of expression openly. Nice. Now, I think eventually these are all core values that literally have them mapped out in images that, in an office space one day when things actually be someone normal, they'll be listed or be hanging on the walls, I should say. But, when you brought up core values, I don't think, and again, it's so ironic that you're on the show because it's several days after I actually mapped out all of these, but those are a true reflection of who I am as a person. And to be honest with you, when I think back of it now, I was like, holy shit, like the clients that we have right now, they resonate with these core values.
Sure, because it's reflective of your brand, and you want people that are in alignment with your brand. So, to give you a really great example of that, so in my old office, right, I shut down so the pandemic started it got really bad here in South Florida mid-March, and I was away at a retreat that I was doing, a young professional retreat with my buddy Pablo. We co-hosted a retreat together in North Carolina, Nashville, and that weekend I made an executive decision to close down my office, and then in June I moved out of my office. So I've been online fully since then, but previous to that, for the years that I was in my office, behind my wall of my suite, on the other side of my wall, was a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
In the amount of years that I worked in that office, I don't know, it was 5 years, I had 0 referrals that I sent over to her. Why? Because my job is to first find you all of the natural, healthier ways that I can help you solve this problem, anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, through the most integrative, natural ways, through supplementation, of finding out what's going on with your diet, what's going on if you're not getting the right biochemistry, what's going on if you're not meditating, your stress handle, and your exercise, and your water intake. And let's try the 44 things first before I have to send you there. And we usually did find it, right? So one day she came into my office, and she was a very nice person, and she came into my office, or we saw each other in the hallway, and she's like, "Oh, I got these extra sodas. I got the wrong sodas from my waiting room. Do you want them?" or something like that. And my response to her, with this big grin on my face, was, "There's no fucking way those are coming into my office." And she looked at me like, "What? Like, what the F is wrong with you?" Well, plenty, but that's not the point. So, and I'm like, "Sorry, I don't serve my clients soda." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, the ones that you're showing me have something called aspartame in it. And aspartame is a known and listed neurotoxin. In fact, it's one of the most insidious chemicals you can willingly put into your body." And I'm completely against people consuming those type of things. And I'm trying to get them off those type of things, including medication, right? If I can help them get off medication with the right team. Yeah. And she's like, well, it's okay if it's every once in a while. Like, you know what? You're right. So do you want to come with me to the strip club around the corner, and we do a line of Coke, but we're only going to go once this year. So it's moderation.
Yeah.
But we're only going to do one line of Coke.
Right.
Once. But it's moderation. Right?
Moderation, right.
So we have these stories of A, justification for why we think things are okay, but 2, the core values of our perspectives on how we practice to work with people, we're both in the mental health field, are as far away as could possibly be. And therefore, when I was interviewing associates to be part of the practice, if they walked in with a soda in their hand for an interview, there is no interview.
Yeah, you said something that I just wanted to touch upon, is just that you made a really good point that I think in the society we live in, there's so many things that have been scrutinized for the individual personal gain of people. So we have literally become so immune to bullshit in society as human beings that we have literally forgotten the very small things that have the biggest impact. And I'm a prime example of this. You talked about health and nutrition. I've struggled for it for 20 years. I shit you not. After high school days, smoking, bullying, just trying to find my path. And then last year in September, after I did the carnivore diet as a test for 30 days, I was at the lowest weight I had been since I was 18 years old.
Sure.
Since I was 18 years old. And that was an enlightening experience, Jason, because it wasn't really as much about the nutrition. It wasn't about the weight even. It was about what it did right here. Mm-hmm. It was about suddenly how, like, almost a switch turned on and said, you've always had it in you. You've always had it to shift your mindset, to invigorate and stimulate your mind. And by doing so, because if you feel better, right? Or if you look better, you'll feel better.
Exactly. And if you feel better, you're going to look better too, because you're going to start giving yourself a better perspective of things in the world. I remember years ago, I was working with this Chinese medicine practitioner, and they there's two for people out there who like, just in the world of acupuncture, there's really two fields. There's TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and 5 elements. And 5 elements was the original theory, and it was much more spiritual oriented as well. And then TCM, the emperor, came along and they took out all the spiritual side and made it really medical. So I didn't know the difference until I went to this clinic, and it was like super amazing. Like, I mean, they were just doing some cool stuff, and they gave me this herb concoction where it was like, it's not like the pills, like you brew your own herbs, and it like it basically tastes like leftover cigarette water from like a like if you had in like a bong and you drank that water. But yeah, that's what China, unfortunately, like when you get the raw herbs, sometimes it's not the most pleasant, pleasant tasting, but it's powerful as hell. And I remember waking up the day, so I started it on whatever day, and then I remember waking up the next morning, and I was not home. I was actually out of state, and in a place where I really didn't like at the time. And I remember waking up, going out. I'm like, God, it's beautiful out today. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, where is this coming? Right? It was just like this, like mindset, like there was just this organic shift that I couldn't even control. That I didn't like this place. That I already felt better on a biochemistry level. That something overpowered that. Yeah. And we get stuck in that so many times that I look at everything through this lens called the home run formula. You put the issue on the pitcher's mound, and we run the bases. Many times people only go to someone to help them with one base without rounding the bases to make sure all are touched. Yeah. Right. So that first base for me would be the emotions, the world of emotions. Second base would be toxicity. What have you been exposed to environmentally? Right. Food, pesticides, electromagnetic, right? All those things that are affecting you, your biochemistry, your mind, and your body. Right. Third base would be nutritional deficiencies, and home plate would be structural, physical therapy, acupuncture, chiropractic, physio, right, massage. And if we don't check all of those 4 bases on every issue, we're missing something, and things can fall through the cracks. So that's when I'm working with someone as a practitioner, I'm making sure that they're hitting everything, even if it's a business. Right? Let's figure out what's going on. Are you right? If you're trying to run a high-end business, are you eating every 3 to 4 hours, getting the right nutrition in, and are you getting the right protein in? Are you loading yourself up on just like, frappuccinos and having like 15 cups of coffee a day, and like, right? And that's very acidic, and the more acidity in your body, then your body's getting thrown out, and then it's going to affect your biochemistry, and then your gut create. I mean, there's a whole cascade of stuff. Yep. Which because you cut out a ton of stuff that worked for you. Now that wouldn't work for me because I've tried it. And I know my biochemistry is different. So these diets that are all like keto for everybody, I'm not a fan of. Keto for some people, yes. Intermittent fasting for many people, yes. Right? But it has to be the right based on what you specifically need. The same way it's the same with like whatever resources we need in our life. The right therapist, the right personal trainer, the right relationships. How do you decide who that is? What are your core values, and do they align with that?
All these things you just mentioned and how this really plays into entrepreneurship is so key, because you were talking about nutrition first. Yeah. And I will tell you this is I fasted for 9 months. Then I did carnivore in September, lost 12 pounds. That was great, but it wasn't sustainable. You were talking about like these natural herbs. I did that 2 years ago as part of a diet, and I did these cleanses that I was like, what the hell is this shit that I'm like, it tastes terrible.
Awful. And what the hell is this shit coming out of me too? Right.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, I love this joke that the joke is what happens when you take a lot of expensive supplements. Right. You have a lot of expensive urine and a lot of expensive shit. If you're not taking exactly what you need, right? These detoxes, right? How do you know you need? Well, I need a liver detox. What does that mean? Right. Yeah. So I'm not like a big fan of people going on these crazy detoxes without knowing specifically what you need based on your functional blood chemistry for you.
Well, right? That's just it, is what you just said. Is this that, the different diets I did were not sustainable. They were meant to be like, and mind you, before I did the carnivore diet, also, is a lot of people were like, and the shit I read on the internet was like, this causes heart attacks and this and that and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, if I believe the shit I read on the internet, I'll never do this. So I ended up doing it, and I even followed it to about 90%, I shit you not, because it was so hard to just eat meat basically for 30 days and drink water and cut alcohol too for 30 days. Because I'm an Eastern European, even though I cut out beer now almost a year ago, I like social drinking. I just do. Sure. I like a glass of wine, even the hard liquor now, but you said it, is that they're not sustainable. And so when you said eating 3 to 4 hours, that's what I've been doing or trying to for the last couple of months now on this new plan, is that it's every 3 hours, 4 times per day, because your metabolism needs to get more regular. And mind you, I have a very high metabolism. It's just something that I was born with, but the metabolism also slows down as you get older. So now it's a different story, and introducing more of a gym. Now, mind you, earlier on you said, and I just remembered this, that you're the first in your family not to be in the furniture business. Now, I'm technically, I would say the first, but my father's technically the first entrepreneur in the entire Bulgarian family. Wow. Talk about breaking the chain, right?
Yeah.
Now, mind you, with that came all kinds of pushbacks, right? Now, nobody in my family has ever ate right until my father's cholesterol was pushing 300, and the doctor said, dude, lay off the burgers, man. Lay off the shit you've been eating. This stuff is not good for you.
Sure.
My dad's like, it was basically an ultimatum, but you don't need to get to that point.
No, but we're stubborn. Wait. We're so stubborn, and it does sometimes have to be that like fight or flight, aha moment versus just the simple, general, gradual shifts and changes over the course of the day, over the course of the week, over the course of the months, over the course of years. In other words, you can start adapting. Like if we're just going to stay in the world of nutrition just for a second as a good example, it doesn't mean you have to go all organic tomorrow.
Right.
But you can pick one category of food that you are only going to buy organic from here on out.
Yeah.
Right? And then next year, what's the next category? So you can say, you know what? All of my canned goods that I'm going to buy, all my canned goods and all of my frozen goods, I'm going to make sure they're organic. That's a good start, right? And then you move into the next category. Okay, all my dairy products or all my meat products, I want them to be farm raised or vegetarian fed or whatever it may be, right? You don't have to do this. It's obviously if you have the capability and the financial ability to just do that, great. But if it's too scary, too startling, right? Or it's not even just that, but it's also like, I'm going to start cutting out certain types of food. I'm going to replace my sodas with Powerade. Now, Powerade's not awesome for you, but it's better than soda. There's still a shit ton of sugar in it. But then it's, okay, well, then I'm going to move from that to a stevia sweetened drink, not the aspartame, not all the fake sugars. Right. I want everybody out there to hear that. The research on the fake sugars, as much as people say, no, it's really not that bad and it's okay every once in a while, within 5 minutes in your biochemistry, your whole system changes. Your whole system changes. Yep. So, right? So maybe if you're like the soft drink person, start experimenting and like, I love soda. I can't give up my soda. Okay. Then go to Whole Foods, go online on Amazon Prime with your Whole Foods now, since no one has, who doesn't have access to Prime at this point. Start experimenting with all of the different, right? If not, you have it from your friends, right? My last podcast interview, I traded my my Apple Plus membership for someone's Disney Plus membership with the host on the show. We swap.
Nice.
So, right? It's networking.
I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So talk about subscriptions, dude. We got everything. We got YouTube TV. We got Netflix. We've got Disney Plus. We got Apple. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I might as well get
leverage it. Leverage it. I have a buddy of mine, right, who's on Clubhouse. It's just again side tangent, but this is what makes it so fun. A buddy of mine sold his Clubhouse because you only get a certain amount. You get one invite when you join, and then as you get more involved, I think they give you more. He sold all of his invites.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a way to profit, right?
Yeah. Why not? Because people were dying to get on the last couple weeks. So now for me, I'm using it as, if you work with me, as if you do a coaching, a year coaching plan with me, I'm going to give you my Clubhouse membership. The ones that I have for free. That's an additional.
Wow.
Yeah. That'll be my, awesome. If you don't have a membership to Clubhouse, because it's by invite only. If you do a year contract with me, that's my value add. And trust me, there are value adds on there, because the people that I've already met from that has been an incredible, right? Talking about getting in front of people. But again, going back to the nutrition thing, always make things, we make things more difficult than what we have to make them. And again, simplicity always wins. And the other side of the coin is, who do you need in your life to help you? Who's the accountability, right? That was one of your words. Who do we need? I'm a big fan of the dream team. Who is your dream team that will help you get there? And you don't need to know them in person. You talked about Andy Frisella and Ed Milet, right? I have a friend of mine. She's doing 75 hard now. And
oh, wow.
She never, ever, 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 ever would have been introduced to an Andy podcast because she's not, that's not her culture. And I, was talking about it once or I don't know, whatever it was. Oh, maybe in one of my young professional entrepreneur, I do a group coaching thing on Tuesday night. So if any of the listeners are interested, it's for singles who are young professionals. And I was talking about it, and now she's doing 75 hard.
Yeah. The interesting you said that because, I live in St. Louis, Missouri, so it's the Mecca. First Farm headquarters is 30 minutes from my house, and, Andy is a household name. In fact, some old neighbors of mine actually went to high school with him. And so, he's kind of a household name. And when I was at the Arte conference 2 years ago, like it was really, it was a groundbreaking thing. But going back to the nutrition, I want to mention something that is so key that, so for instance, I started cycling 8 years ago too. It wasn't really about cycling. I love it like crazy. It's my invigoration, right?
Indoor or outdoor?
It's outdoor.
Okay, so you're like road cycling, like carbon fiber clipped in and everything?
Oh yeah, dude, I'm
good for you, brother.
Handlebars,
nice, me too.
70 miles per week. Like good I'm just fucking cranking it.
Good for you.
Yeah. But
what you riding?
So I have an aluminum bike. It's handlebars. And clipping. I invested in shoes and on pavement. Go out.
Yeah. We go road cycling. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, and so, but you know what? It's not about endurance. It's not about fitness. It's about this.
Yeah, it's also about having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to impress upon that because years ago, I grew up playing tennis and baseball. Those are my two favorite sports. Huge Agassi fan. You can see Don Mattingly right behind me.
Oh, nice.
From his Yankee days, even though he's now the manager of the Marlins, the Florida Marlins down here, right? Or the Miami Marlins, whatever they've changed their name to. But I can't keep track. So, but I remember years ago, I was 25, and I got hooked up with a tennis coach here, and it was so dirt cheap. It was ridiculous. And I'm still playing with that coach off and on over the years. And I yell at her for not raising her prices from 10, 15 years ago. And so I remember getting back on the court that morning, and I was so out of shape that I was dry heaving on the side of the court. At 24, 25 years old. Dry heaving. And I remember how badly I played, how out of shape I was, but the fact that I was on the tennis court was so amazing.
Yeah.
And that's my mindset. That I want to have, when I go run and I'm and I try to do a half marathon at least once a year. I do. So right now, since there's no real half marathons that I can really sign up for, whatever in Florida, but I'm going to do one by myself, a self-guided one, because the rules are broken. Why not do your own half marathon? Why not do your own 5K? Right. Why not do your own, right? So, I want to make sure that I'm also, as much as it burns and it hurts, that I'm having the mindset of, oh my God, I'm so blessed that I'm capable of doing this.
You hit the nail on the head, Jason. It's take Clubhouse, for example. There was a few rooms that I was in, and they were talking about like mindset and improvements, that type of stuff, personal development, and I came out with gratitude, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I get to wake up every day. I get to see my kids. I get to see my wife. Everything else I feel like is materialistic, but positioning yourself in that mindset to understand that, the fact that your heart is beating and you have air in your lungs, you've got two eyes, you've got two hands, you've got 2 feet.
Yep.
One over probably 90% of society, because there's people that won't wake up. There's people that have heart problems, people that have lung problems.
We got COVID going on right now. Yeah, we got this crazy pandemic where I know there's a 32. One of my friends is a teacher at one of the private schools here, and he's like, "There's a 32-year-old guy in a coma from COVID." One of the teachers, 32 years old.
Yeah, it's
married with kids, right? So we absolutely completely need to be in this gratitude appreciation stage, and it's so funny that like the person who drops the most F-bombs is the person who talks about gratitude the most, which is Gary Vee. Right?
Love the guy.
Love it. I always like this guy would have been, forget him being like as amazing as he is. He has such a fingerprint on human dynamics.
Yep.
That he would have been an insane therapist.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I really, one of the reasons I followed Gary Vee is because of that and what you described, but also because being a fellow immigrant and kind of paved his own path to success and building businesses but you said that he's hacked human culture.
Yeah,
and I think in today's society, if you have it, and there's a select few that do, to hack human culture and hack into current trends, sky's the limit.
Mm-hmm.
You can literally build anything, any business, make any amount of money,
sure.
Relationships. But that takes, a specific, I feel like it's a DNA thing.
I think it's also, yes, for sure. But I think that we can, in the world of epigenetics, which is the study of our genetic expression, scientifically proven that we can change our genetic expression. So someone can evolve into this with the right mindset. The stuff that I'm talking about now, the stuff that I have a podcast that is about to hit, that I think dropped episode 80. Yeah. The fact that I'm getting in front of insane people and people like you want me on their show 10 years ago was nowhere near. I remember when podcasts first came out, and I'm like, oh, whatever, podcasts are bullshit. Like, what is this thing, right? Whatever it is. And then I remember, I started, some of my friends who are big in the entrepreneur space that are doing crazy money. I'm like, all right, let me think about doing this for myself as far as bringing it a greater thing of bringing, because I'm already doing workshops and teaching and being brought in to do retreats and stuff like that. But I never thought of doing it in this type of format. And now it's kind of like, I just reached out to someone. Do you remember the TV show Lie to Me? That was on a bunch of years ago. It was about this guy who was able to read facial recognition to tell if they were telling the truth or not. It was on Fox, but it was a great show. And it's based on the work of Dr. Paul Ekman, who's a psychologist who did facial recognition and micro expressions and stuff like that. Now he only does interviews for major news channels like CNN and whatever. So I wrote to them. I got nothing to lose. And my response to them was, I know it says on your website you only respond to interviews for these type of things, but I've also noticed you have never done a podcast interview. If I don't ask, I can't get the yes. I'm already, right? So I'm putting it out there, right? That's how I got Howard Behar from Starbucks, the former international president of Starbucks and the author of It's Not About the Coffee, right? We have to get past, I said, I love your everything you're doing. I love X, Y, and Z, your conscious capitalism and right, social entrepreneurship and all that stuff like that. I would love to. 15 minutes later, he wrote me back saying yes, right? Yeah. Never would I expected I said that he would say yes. So this is what I learned from that I really want to give as a tasty nugget to everybody. The worst thing that can happen if you ask is not no.
Yeah.
Because if you already expect the no, you don't have to do anything different in your life. But if they say yes, you got to amp up your game.
You hit the nail on the head because there's been a few celebrities on the show, like, Forbes Riley and Elena Cardone, wife of Grant Cardone. Yep. And I just actually 2 weeks ago did an episode with Justin Guarini from American Idol.
Oh, cool.
First episode. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, but you just nailed it, is that if you don't ask, you'll never know. Right. And I think that's what most people are unwilling to do because of the scarcity mindset that they keep holding on to, because society has sort of tumultured that in their heads that scarcity is how you live by. Amazing conversation, everything we've talked about, but I have to ask, because you've done a lot of coaching, we didn't even talk about, MLB and, NBA and the U.S. Tennis Association and different players. But what I want to know from you is, in your experience with everything that you've done, what are maybe the top 3 things that you have seen humans and entrepreneurs struggle with the most?
Yeah. So we all have insecurities. No matter what level we're playing at, we still have insecurities. So, when I was working with some former professional athletes, it was kind of their childhood stuff that they never got dealt with. So number one, if you have stuff that's still unresolved in your life from your childhood, as cliche as this sounds, it's still going to play out, and it's most specifically going to play out in your romantic relationships. So that's number one, right? Heal your unfinished business. Go to a good therapist. get that handled. Here's a try. I also want to make sure that people know out there, there's a coach, the coach, anybody can become a coach, right? You can wake up tomorrow, go to the bathroom, wipe your butt and call yourself a coach, right? It's an unregulated industry. So you got to know who you're working with. That's number 2, yep. Right? I mean, as far as that paradigm, but I want people to, like, if you have trauma in your life, you need a therapist. And the reason why is that feelings buried alive never die. It will never heal, and it will show up in multiple places, and it will affect things in any way, shape, or form. So that's one. Number 2 is that, again, that insecurities. That no matter what we achieve, no matter what level of success, there's still going to be a layer of insecurity. And I'm sure that Andy and Ed and Grant and Elena and Ellen and Dr. Phil and Deepak, they all have insecurities still about something. It's just there's peeling away layers of it. And maybe there's things in our life that we won't ever fully solve, but you want to get as many layers of that onion peeled away as possible and use those from strengths and make them into, from weaknesses and make them into strengths.
Yeah. No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that, is because I think, in today's day and age, I think too many people look at others, especially celebrities and successful people, from a status quo standpoint.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this. I mean, I heard Grant Cardone several times on Clubhouse specifically in some of the bigger rooms, and you could almost sense that there's still insecurities in his voice. Sure. And in fact, one of the moderators actually had asked him, obviously he's done the Undercover Billionaire show on Discovery Now. And in fact, a lot of people were bashing him last year when he was filming this, because they started making all these made up bullshit stories because of what led up to the show, because he was like so inaccessible. Right. But well, you know what he said? He said, I'm playing too small. He said, I know it. I'm playing too small.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a lot of things, but I'm playing too small. And this is a guy that brings, like, Kevin Hart and Dana White, and all these celebrities,
Sure. I've been to 2 of his 10X conferences. Yeah.
And so, but you're absolutely right that everybody has insecurities. I'm glad you talked about this, is because, let's face it, and in today's day and age, someone looks at you and says, Jason, you've done so many great things, man. Right. But guess what? Jason has insecurities too. Just like everybody else, because we're human.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's the challenge, that too many people look at things so black and white.
Yeah.
And don't understand that, like, and I saw this in a newsletter from Andy this morning, is like, success is becoming the best version of you. But what that version is, you have to define, not society, not your mom, not your dad, not your wife, nobody.
Right.
It's you.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Jason, I know we could totally keep chatting.
Well, I just want to give you a quick anecdote just to prove that. I went to the 10X in Vegas. And I was there for the 2 days, and then I had to fly back out to another business conference. But one of my friends from my business program, at the 10X conference, he did a book release. And at the book release was a bunch of those big heavy hitters, because they've been on the show for his podcast. And Coach Michael Burt was there, and all these people from that spoke at 10X. And I remember, like, meeting, Hank Norman, these people who are, like, behind Grant Cardone, right? The social help Grant Cardone get really is big, and stuff like that. So I remember being at this event and going up the elevator with to the top floor of the whatever the hotel was, and to the where the lounge was, where this event was. Right. And one of the employees of my friend's company at that point was doing over $100 million a year. And I'm like, so what's it like working with this guy? And he's like, that's cool. I'm like, do you listen to his podcast? And they're like, no. I'm like, why not? Do you realize, like, the amount of value that you're getting? He's like, well, it's just my boss. I'm like, do you not realize who you work for? Right. So whatever. So that weekend I saw some of these speakers and some of these names, and then, like, to realize that, like, a year or two later at the 10X in Miami, I can't remember where it was, a year or 2 years later. Yeah. So Coach Burt spoke at that Vegas one. 2 years, I guess it was 2 years later, I'm sitting in Coach Burt's box, skybox, for majority of the 10X conference, because I formed that relationship with that person over that time. And I invested some time, effort, and money into doing some coaching with them, and was invited to stay and hang out in the box, and met all these incredible people. And because it was that 2 years ago, I never would have, but I'm like, oh, I'm going to go up and say hi.
Yeah.
And he's like, come hang out, come stay, right? But otherwise I was sitting in the $50 cheap seats. So we have to realize like this, that, years ago, I never would have been ballsy enough to even just go in and like want to go say hi, and reintroduce myself to this person. Cause why would he care about me? Right. And like you said, like for about Ed, for why would he care? Why would he remember to send me a birthday? I mean, that's like at the end of the day, relationships are still the core of any type of success, especially in the entrepreneur world.
One relationship away.
Yeah. And you might already have it. You just don't realize. Also, that's the duality of it. It's one relationship away out there, and you might already have that relationship, and you just didn't know to look at it in that light.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I feel like there's so much more to unpack. I mean, your bio is full of amazing experiences that you've done. Congratulations and everything
Thank you.
that you've done. These are all accomplishments to be proud of. But before we sign off on the episode, throw out some social handles, ways that people can connect with you out there for a convo or, some counseling, therapy, anything that's within your wheelhouse.
Sure. So my interesting enough, with all the craziness going on in the social media world, about a month and so we're now in the end of January 2021. But in the beginning of December, I woke up one day and my Instagram was shut down.
What?
I don't post anything political. I don't post anything pandemic wise. It was shut down. Been trying to get it back. No rhyme or no reason, whatever.
Wow.
So I had a nice little thing. So I had to switch it over to my backup one, which I didn't really build. So people are like, oh, this guy only has 200 and something followers, whatever. It's because I had a, whatever. And I'm not I don't get involved in the crazy politics stuff, and I focus on what I know. So You Winning Life is the name of my podcast. My Instagram is also You Winning Life, and if you go to youwinninglife.com, that'll actually bring you to my private practice website. And if you are interested, if someone is interested in seeing if we're a good fit to partner together on this therapy coaching hybrid, more than if I just drop me a message, drop me a DM, and
absolutely,
I'm happy to connect and be of service, and if not, point you in the right direction of who could be a good. So I'm a big fan of that. If I'm not the right person, let me help you get in front of the right person.
I love that, and once again, congratulations on everything that you've done. You've had some great experiences, lots of trial and error, it sounds like, and I appreciate your time and coming on the show.
Oh, I'm very honored because I know we had a few reschedules that we had to do, so it means a lot to me that we were able to make this time, and I very much I want to congratulate you, and for also happy birthday, and it's all the good stuff. I'm a year, I got a year ahead of you, but it's to see that you and other people like us are finding our authenticity, are finding our potential, are trying to do good for the world. They're trying to bring, the bring value is so cliche, right? That word, right? I want to bring value, right? It's what are you serving your purpose in this world? And it's so nice to see someone doing that. So I want to congratulate you on that. And it's been I've had so much fun, and utilize me in the future if and I'm more than happy to come back on and bring more to your community.